All right. So again, my name is Lacey Brown. I'm with South Dakota State University Extension. I'm located in Rapid City today. We host these webinars in collaboration with North Dakota State University Extension. And our guest today is Heather Fuller. Heather is an associate professor in the Department of Human Development and Family Sciences at North Dakota State University. She received a master's and doctoral degrees in developmental psychology from the University of Michigan. Her teaching and scholarly work focuses on the influence of social relationships and cultural contexts on the development across the lifespan, including a specific focus on intergenerational and family relationships in later life. She directs the Linked Lived Research Lab at NDSU, where her research broadly focuses on interpersonal relationships and social integration and links to successful aging. Her recent projects focus on better understanding social and community engagement, as well as social isolation and loneliness among older adults, and examining the supports and needs related to informal caregiving within aging families, particularly within rural communities. She has worked in the field of gerontology for 20 years, with experience including academic research and outreach, project management and evaluation, and service provision to older adults and their families at the community level. So I am going to turn it over to Heather.
I can't believe I started muted. Already I've failed that test. Thank you, Lacey, for that lovely introduction. I'm so glad to be here today to join you all for this series. Thank you for joining. Before I start, can everyone see my slides okay? We're good with that? Okay, yes, great. Thank you so much. So today, I'm going to be just sharing a variety of different ideas and resources related to aging alone and strategies for successful solo aging. Maybe you are a current caregiver who is also aging solo yourself, and this might be of interest to you, just thinking of strategies for yourself, but maybe it's about somebody that you love or someone that you work with that you're thinking about. What are the strategies that they need to be able to age alone, and how can I support them in that? So I am perfectly fine with being informal. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt and throw them in the chat as we're going. I'm hoping to be a bit interactive today and have you share some of your thoughts and ideas on this topic. Let me get started just with an overview of what I want to cover today. So I want to start just by introducing what aging alone, what I'm referring to when we're referring to aging alone today, and then talking about some challenges as well as some benefits of solo aging. And then we'll really dive into kind of the meat of today, which is what are some strategies to be able to age well alone, covering a wide array of different types of strategies. And then we'll leave plenty of time for discussion and your questions. And if I have time, I have some resources too that I'd like to show you. We'll see how our time works out, but I'll definitely get those forwarded to you in a handout as well. Okay, so jumping off here, defining solo aging. So solo agers are referred to or defined as people over the age of 50 who live alone. They're not married or partnered, and they don't have any living children. This is also sometimes referred to as elder orphans. I don't particularly love that term just because it seems to engender pity, right? And I think we need to recognize that aging alone isn't necessarily something that is against people's will, right? There's many people that they're choosing this. This is their choice to age alone, and it's kind of empowering for them. So I think what we need to focus on is how do we support this within our society, within our culture, and the term solo ager seems a bit more empowering to me. If you have your own preferred term, feel free to add it in the chat. I'd love to see what other terms out there you like for individuals that are aging alone. So when we look at this type of definition of individuals 50 plus, it's about 12% of 50 plus doesn't really feel older adult, but 50 plus is what AARP typically looks at, right? So 50% or 12% are aging alone. When we use a more lenient definition, perhaps saying you have children, but they're not reliable, right? So individuals that feel like they can't count on their children being there for them, then we get up to 23% that could fall into that category of solo aging. So it is a quite big percentage of the population. So it's something that we should really be thinking about when we're thinking about the needs and potential caregiving needs for older individuals aging alone. When we look at what we know about solo aging, this is becoming increasingly common, particularly among baby boomers, right? Baby boomers are more likely to make this choice based on the choices they've made over their careers. But sometimes it's also involuntary. It's a matter of circumstance, right? So when we think about aging alone as a voluntary choice, this may be out of preference. It may be a human agency choice, maybe a choice to focus on a career, maybe that choice to divorce and be alone, kind of in that empowering way. We can also think about it as more involuntary. So individuals that feel like they maybe wanted to partner, but they never met the right individual, maybe historic events that caused it, maybe infertility could have caused someone that wanted to have children to not, or widowhood, right? So all different spectrum here. So it often really is on a continuum where people aren't necessarily entirely feeling like this was voluntary or this was involuntary. It's kind of a mix of those two. But most people feel comfortable in their status as solo aging. So most 9 out of 10 do live in their own home and would consider staying in their home long-term. And of those, only about a third have someone to help manage their household if needed. So it's really important to think about, this is a population that wants to be able to age in place and maintain their independent homes. But if they don't have kind of that easiest route of a spouse or a child to help them, what other supports do they need? Okay, before I move on to this section on challenges and supports, I want to get you involved. So if you are willing to either unmute yourself and share or go ahead and throw it in the chat box, what challenges come to mind when you think of solo aging? So anything that comes to mind, just throw it in the chat box. Challenges or barriers. I see potential for social isolation. Sure, that's the one. Health. So it might impact your health, or perhaps it can make challenges in accessing healthcare, transportation. Sure. So especially if you're no longer able to drive, who can help you drive and get to appointments? I see loneliness again, healthcare, and yeah, medical appointments, getting to those medical appointments. Those can all be challenges of aging alone. Will preparation, so some legal challenges there, right? Infantilizing the elderly or older adults. So being treated as dependent, right? So maybe being treated like this, you can't make your own decisions, someone else needs to step in. Food, meals, these are all great ideas. Thinking about who will take care of you if you need to be taken care of. What will you do with all of your stuff? Oh, this is a good one. Pets. What will happen to your pets if you can no longer take care of them? Who will look out for me? Boredom. You all have so many great ideas. Mobility at home. Are you able to keep up with household maintenance? So not just wanting to be able to live in your home and maintain, but being able to maintain that home. Those are all great challenges, and you all came up with even more than what I have on my list here. But here are some common ones that solo agers list in the research that asks them, what are the barriers or obstacles that you face? So finding help when they're sick or when you need surgery, when you need to to go to an appointment, medical appointment, when you have something even more severe than just an appointment. Choosing a healthcare proxy, right? So some of those legal pieces, who's going to be responsible when often we have a healthcare proxy or a power of attorney in place that maybe it's often going to be your spouse, or it's often going to be a child. Who do you choose if you don't have those two options? Having adequate social engagement, you all mentioned those. Being isolated, potentially lonely is another important one. Transportation, you all brought up. Lacking access to a caregiver. So if you need someone to provide care, do you have access to an informal caregiver, right? Or do you need to focus on a formal paid caregiver? And affording appropriate housing. So you all brought up a few things related to housing and maintaining that housing, but finances definitely come up when you're a solo ager, right? Because you haven't necessarily had those two incomes. You don't necessarily have children that can maybe help you out financially, and so there's a lot more financial considerations that come into play. All great ideas. All right, now I'm going to make you flip. Think the opposite side of the spectrum, because there are some empowering things about aging alone. So what benefits come to mind when you think of solo aging? Can you think of some benefits that you would go ahead and add them in the chat again? You don't have to answer to anyone. It's just you. Yeah, so getting to make your own decisions, independence and freedom, self-determination, your own time. So you've got time to yourself. You get to decide how to use your time. You don't have to take care of anyone else, right? When we talk about caregiving, a big challenge is to the caregivers themselves needing to take care of, their children, their spouse, especially not having to take care of that spouse. Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential benefits that come along, and there's a reason that people choose this, or that people, can find being a solo ager to be empowering, and lots of benefits here. You mentioned a lot of these. Freedom. So freedom to get to choose how you want to live your older adulthood. Less relationship related stress. So, as wonderful as family relationships are and as beneficial as they can be, they also are very stressful. I always, talk to my students about the research on marriage, and how that your spouse is often your best confidant and the person that you rely on the most, but also the person that brings you the most stress. And so there's a lot of conflict often within family relationships. Reduced financial expenditures, which you all brought up in the chat. Privacy, so that you get to actually kind of have your own space and live your life the way that you want to. Also, the ability to focus on chosen family, right? So kind of related to that family stress, not all of our family relationships are great. And so there's a lot of benefits to focusing on those people that we really want to include in our lives. Most solo agers, as I've already alluded to, have positive feelings about living alone as they age. So this is a research study from AARP in 2021, and the most common descriptors that they used of being a solo ager were being independent, feeling satisfied, being happy, and being proud. So a lot of positive descriptors. This is a figure from that same study about perceptions of quality of life. And the finding here is that it's similar to non-solo agers. So if I can explain this a little bit, here the top bars are solo agers above the age of 50. The bottom row of bars are adults over the age of 50. So just the general population of adults. And so the study looked at how they felt about their quality of life as they age, right? So are you feeling optimistic? You're kind of feeling neutral, or you're feeling pessimistic about what your quality of life looks like as you age. So these blue bars are feeling extremely or very optimistic. So of the general population of adults here on the bottom, about 48% said they feel extremely or very optimistic. when we look at the solo agers, it's about 45%. So it's very similar, right? So very similar. When we look at the yellow bars, this is everybody that felt neutral. 43% of the solo agers and 37% of the general population of adults over age 50. And then what I want to point out is this last bar here, the red. So it's 15% of the general population that feels pessimistic about their quality of life as they age. But of solo agers, it's only 12%. So it's a little bit lower, right? So solo agers may feel a little bit kind of more neutral than the general population, but they don't feel as extreme in their pessimism. Let's see, I'm just looking at a comment here. Someone sent a comment. A lot depends on how you become a solo, whether it was your choice or not. Becoming a solo due to untimely death of a spouse can be hard to find the benefits. That is definitely true. That is definitely a great point, and why it's so important to understand the different perspectives, right? When we're working with solo agers, it's important from the get-go to really understand, what is it that brought you here? Is this something that you chose and that was voluntary, or is it something that was involuntary? Also, to that point, is it recent or is this long-term, right? Whereas like a recent widow or widower may really be struggling with that life transition and being a solo ager, whereas somebody that this has been kind of a longer path for them may be more adjusted. Yeah, great points. Okay, let me dive into the meat of today's presentation. So talking about some tips for successful solo aging. So 3 different areas that I want to focus on. First is that area of making plans when you're still healthy. So making plans well in advance. So, an AARP starts to focus on aging at age 50. That feels pretty young to most people. But if we make plans when we're younger, then we don't have to think it through. We've already got a plan set by the time maybe it's too late to make all the plans ourselves. Reaching out to others is the second major tip we'll talk about, and then taking care of yourself. Okay, so before we can plan, we need to assess what our needs are. So if I'm an individual that's going to be aging alone, it's really important for me to understand the whole picture of my life and my well-being and what's going to change as I get older. And so this is one example of a way that you can kind of easily assess your needs visually. This is, some of you may have seen this before. Sometimes it's called a wellness wheel. Sometimes it's called a wheel of life. I've just adapted a version of this to think about some of the major things that we need to plan for if we're aging alone. So the way this works, if I can just kind of try to point out a little bit, this has, think of it like pizza pie. It has 8 different slices, or apple pie if you'd prefer an apple pie, 8 different slices, and each slice represents a different aspect of your needs in life. Oops, let me admit, Jane. Okay, a different aspect of your needs, and you're going to rate it from 1 to 10, right? Where 1 is going to be, I'm really not satisfied, these needs are not being met. 10 would be, I'm perfectly satisfied, this need is being met. Most things are going to be somewhere in between there for most people. So it may not look like it, but it actually does have 10 rings here. So the first ring, if I can get my animation there, the first ring right in the middle. So if you were going to rate it as a 1, you just fill in that first ring. And if you were going to rate it as a 10, you'd fill all the way out to the last ring. And I'll show you an example of this in a second. This can help us identify where to focus our needs. So we want to think about housing, right? What is the quality of our housing? Do we like the location where we live? Is the setup of our house something that'll meet our needs now and in the long term? We think about safety and legal issues. Are you satisfied with the safety of the neighborhood where you live, the safety of the house? Are there any issues with neighbors, things like that might affect safety? But then also legal issues that need to be taken care of. Thinking of, do you need a power of attorney? Do you need a health proxy? Do you have a will in place? Taxes, all of those types of things, which flows right into finances, right? If you think about your finances, how well does your budget meet your needs? And how do you feel about future planning? For instance, paying for care when you get to the point where you might need care, long-term care, or care in your home. purpose in life. And this can mean a lot of things to people, especially at different stages in your life. So purpose might come from your career. It might come from volunteering, from hobbies, from spirituality. It can come from a lot of different places. But how do you feel about your purpose in life? Sense of community is important as well. Thinking about, do I have a sense of belonging within my community? And really, however you define that. Some people define their community as really that close community around them. Others might define it as their social network. And maybe not everybody lives close by and is someone they see often. Sometimes we have virtual communities, even if you can find a community on, Facebook, for instance. And then social support. Do you have friends? Do you have family, whether extended or closer? Do you have neighbors who you can count on to provide support and reciprocity in those relationships? And then mental health, emotionally and cognitively, how is your health? And finally, physical health, physically and functionally, how is your health? So I promised an example of how this might be filled out. I had a little fun with some animation here. So if you're going to assess your needs, you assess them early and then repeatedly, right? So maybe this is something you look at once a year and just think about, how are all my needs being met? And you can really get this visual. So if I think about my housing and I'm feeling pretty good about my housing, here I've filled it in and I've rated it an 8. My house is good, it's safe, I like the location, this is meeting my needs. Safety, legal, I might say, I'm not quite there yet. There's some things that I need to focus on because I don't have a health proxy in place. I don't have a power of attorney. That's something that I probably need to focus on. My finances, I'm feeling good about finances. My budget right now covers all of my needs. Purpose in life, I might think through, hobbies and my connections in life. That's making me feel like I have a good purpose there. So I'm filling this square in, 8 rungs. Community, see here, I filled it in, feeling really good about community, maybe feeling about halfway about social support, so I filled it in this way. Mental health, I've got an individual feeling pretty good about their mental health. They're feeling like cognitively they're doing well and emotionally as well, but maybe they're not feeling as great about their physical health. So they're feeling a little bit lower about the physical health. Maybe they're having some issues with physical functioning. If we fill this out and assess our needs, we could do this individually, or we could do this, with someone else, with a client to help someone else. We can look at this whole picture. We're never going to expect to have that picture entirely darkened in, right? Nobody has a perfect life. It'd be pretty rare to have everything a 10. We just want to see some balance. And then this can help us identify, what are the things that we probably really want to be focusing on right now? So are there any strategies for physical health? Is there something else we could be doing here to plan more to address physical health? Are there some things for legal that we should be addressing? And then noting that this changes over time. So I already mentioned doing this assessment repeatedly, right? So if I were to look at this, every year, it will change slightly, right? I might move and then feel different about my community. I might feel that I've lost some of that sense of community. Or maybe during COVID, that mental health rung really took a hit and we need to find a way to try to address that more. So that brings us into planning. If we have an idea of what our needs are, we can really plan for now. We can try to find solutions for now, but also thinking about our future needs, right? So the best time to plan is when we are in good health, because we typically have more options available to us and time to think and talk about preferences and decisions. So in terms of housing, thinking about where and how you would like to age. Consider, as a solo ager, this is really important to consider, can you remain in your house for the duration? Or, do you have a house with a lot of stairs and it's just not going to work out? Is a location where you don't have access to transportation and it's just not going to work long term. So maybe you want to move now, right? So that you can plan and you don't have to make a move later when you might be in a more frail condition. legal, who will make decisions for you if you become incapacitated. And this is really important for solo agers because your next of kin may not be someone that you want to trust with that, right? So you need to identify, who is that person? Is there a niece or nephew? Is there a close friend? Is there someone else that you want to make your power of attorney and ensure that you have all of your needs met? Financially, it's really important to prepare for anyone ahead of time to be able to retire and cover any needs that you have. But especially for solo agers, it's important to really have a plan. Think about, do you have sufficient funds for your needs in retirement? Or if not, are there resources that you can apply for to help? Right? Should you be applying for supplemental social security? Should you be applying for housing assistance? When you think about the finances for healthcare in the future, do you have long-term care insurance? Can you afford that? Or will you be planning on, moving into like a Medicaid situation where you could be in a long-term care facility through Medicaid? So thinking about those types of things. Also thinking about, if you're unable to, when you're unable to, who will be responsible for managing your money and financial resources? And so reaching out and making sure you have someone that you've tapped for that's in your social network, right? Healthcare wise, how will you manage your medication, your physician appointments, any chronic illness? And are those wishes documented, right? So that your power of attorney knows what to do. And then, of course, you need a support team, right? So developing that support team is really important, especially for solo agers. And we can talk about, a few different key pieces of that support team, but identifying others who can help you. And there's a variety of different people that you might bring into that support team. It might be looking at extended family, neighbors, close friends. It might be some hired support too, or volunteers, and that's okay. Using that support team really to assess your care needs and develop a plan of care. So working together. So you can start with a very basic assessment like that circle that I just showed you, but you can go into much more depth. In the resources today, I've got some examples, but I won't go over those, but I'll send them to you all. The next important piece is making sure that you're staying socially connected. And you all have flagged that for us today, that's one of the big challenges potentially of solo aging is loneliness and potential social isolation. So we do see that there is a risk for solo agers. This figure here shows solo agers have less frequent social contact and are more likely than their peers to feel lonely. So the blue dots are the solo agers and the red dots are just the general population of adults all over age 50. And so we can see this is just the loneliness questionnaire where we ask, do you feel you're lacking companionship? And it's about half of solo agers who say they do. Do you feel isolated from others? It's about 40% that say they do. And do you ever feel left out? Again, it's almost 40%. And so that is higher than the general population. So this is really an important risk that we want to flag. Being a solo ager doesn't mean that we have to age alone, right? So just because you don't have a spouse or someone that you live with doesn't mean that you have to age alone. And I think we're seeing more and more of a shift in this, especially with baby boomers. What we need to be able to do is build a support network. And there's a lot of strategies to how to do that. That gets more difficult in adulthood, right? To build that social support network. But there are definitely ways to do that. So seeking out new companions. Can you find commonality? We have common values, we have common interests, and develop new friendships and new companionship as you get older. Can you foster deeper connections with your current relationships? Often I think we're afraid to reconnect or to kind of delve deeper with relationships. But I think especially in the past couple of years with COVID, we've seen that potential, and that often we just have people kind of sitting in silos all by themselves that are afraid to reach out. And then once you do, you can kind of build this great relationship that's mutually beneficial. So looking for the other people in your life that, hey, they would probably benefit from some more connection too. be proactive and intentional. And that can be really hard. It can be hard to be the first one to reach out and to ask for help and to say you really would like to build more of a connection. But it's important, especially when you're solo aging, to be able to reach out and to really challenge yourself, to step outside of your comfort zone, to be intentional with building that support network. It's okay to ask. The worst that's going to happen is someone's going to say no, and then you go to the next person. Focus on your shared interests and reciprocity. So what about your relationships can be mutually beneficial? I think there's a lot that you can find where there's reciprocity there. Often as we age, we tend to think maybe we don't have as much to give to younger individuals in our lives, but the research on it shows that is not the case, that younger people that benefit tremendously from just the life experience and advice and sharing, having someone to talk to with older generations. So then you need to connect with your social support network, right? You've identified who are these people, how do we connect? And so you can reach out to extended family, right? So for solo agers, we're typically talking about individuals that they don't have a spouse, they don't have children, but there's a lot of other family members that you can reach out to. So think about your siblings. These are often the closest individuals for solo agers, nieces and nephews and cousins. An example in my family, I have one aunt who doesn't have any grandchildren. And so she has developed a very close relationship with my son, so her great nephew, because he's an only child. So she's really looked out and seen, he doesn't have any siblings. I don't have, grandchildren of my own. So that's a way to make a connection, and just built a really lovely connection there. Look within your family. There's always individuals that need other people too. With your extended family, reflect on those life experiences, share advice, build upon common interests. With your friends, keep in mind that your friends can be your family of choice, your found family, your fictive kin. They can stand in for relatives and provide deep and meaningful bonds. It is increasingly common and a critical support for solo agers, that family of choice. Often they can be more beneficial to well-being than family. A lot of research actually shows that friendship can be the most important aspect of successful aging. And then rely on your chosen support networks. So reach out for help when needed. Share your life with others. The most common sources of help with managing our households are when we're looking at solo agers, it is most often going to be friends, right? So 39% say they rely on friends to help manage their household. That's not traditionally who we think of, but we're shifting, right? We're shifting as a society, and friends can definitely help and are willing to help in many cases. The next that they rely on are relatives other than their siblings or niece or nephews, right? So it's not always that it needs to be those closest family relationships. Then we rely on siblings, nieces, nephews, and then neighbors, right? Our neighbors are sometimes our friends, and sometimes they're just the individuals we rely on. And then the last thing I wanted to mention on this is that it's also okay and necessary and important to reach out to formal supports. So not those informal relationships with family and friends, but formal supports through organizations, through businesses. So keep in mind that formal supports, such as a paid caregiver or volunteers, can also be a part of your support team. And that's really important to be open to that. There are more and more opportunities to develop community through engagement with organizations in your community. So for solo agers, it's really a great idea to reach out to your local senior center or local area agency on aging to get assistance in finding the programs that you might benefit from. So for instance, maybe there's a companionship program, maybe there's a transportation program, maybe some of those needs can be met through volunteer programs or maybe grant funded programs, or maybe there are programs for pay, but often a lot of the for pay programs do have sliding scales if financial concerns are at mind. Okay, let me hear a little bit more from you all before we jump into our last piece of advice here, and that is taking care of yourself. So if you can throw some more answers for me into the chat. What are you currently doing to be able to maintain your independence as you age, right? Whether you're thinking about this because you're approaching older adulthood now or not, what are you currently doing to be able to maintain your own independence as you age? Someone says doing puzzles. That's great to keeping busy through puzzles, also keeping your mind active with puzzles, going for walks. So keeping physically active through walks. We're getting to the weather now where we can actually go for walks outdoors, which outdoors is so valuable for us, both because of sunlight, but fresh air, new hobbies, volunteering, purging. I hope you're meaning purging like of things in your house. So decluttering and getting rid of things that you don't need anymore. Volunteering, reading. Yeah. Someone says, I'm thinking ahead, getting a well-prepared budget, expanding circle of friends, looking into different volunteer opportunities, and even thinking about getting a cat. I love all of those ideas, right? Pets can be great companionships. They can be great at helping you stay physically active as well. I have a cat that, believe it or not, we have a stroller for our cat, and we take her out on walks in the stroller. So it's not just dogs that help get you outside. Someone else says, keeping physically fit through outdoor activities, gardening, hiking, canning, home cooking, hunting, fishing, camping. Those are all great activities. Keeping busy, keeping both your body and your mind active, all great. Assume I can do things. Reach out to others, focus on others instead of myself. So that's a good one. Thinking about building connections. I like that first piece, assume I can do things. So that really sounds to me like being proactive, trying new things. So instead of that first assumption of, oh, I don't know how to do that, just starting with, I can do this, let me try. Love it. These are just a few ideas, and I'm sure that you all can think of even more ideas. And this applies to anyone, whether you're a solo ager or not. But taking care of yourself is key, a key piece of planning for aging and going through the aging process, right? So of course we want to stay physically active. Staying physically active is probably the first thing that we think of, but often it seems like too much to do, right? So keep it simple. Think about things that you can do that fit into your daily activities. So can you stretch while you're watching TV? Can you do some chair exercises while you're, just around the house? Maybe just walking with a friend. So it's a time to connect. Walking a little bit longer when you're at the grocery store, right? So just getting yourself a little bit more physical activity can help, and doing something that you enjoy. Making sure that you are getting enough, right? Thinking about even into old age, getting about 30 minutes of moderate exercise at least 3 times a week is really important for all aspects of your health. And thinking about things like strength and balance training as well. Engaging in preventative care is really important. So getting to those doctor appointments, having a diet that's healthy and has all of those great vitamins that you need, making sure that you're taking vitamins for any things that maybe you're missing from your diet, taking that calcium, for instance, if you're not a big milk drinker, those types of things. In that chat here, managing chronic medical conditions is very important, right? So think of that with preventative care, is not letting any of those chronic conditions get away from you, right? If you can keep them in check and manage your care now, you'll be so much better off 10 or 20 years down the road. I also missed one up here, participate in support groups. Yeah, so that's another way to find people that have common interests, which actually that flows into my next slide of focusing more on your mental health too. So managing your stress and prioritizing mental health are key. So thinking about the things that you can do to manage your stress. A lot of the exercise, those types of things, the hobbies will help you manage your stress. But for some people, it needs to go even more than that. So thinking about actual strategies to reduce stress, like journaling, engaging in, different self-care routines. Maybe it's massage, maybe it's walking on a daily basis. All of those things are really important because we know now how much stress impacts physical health and longevity. Prioritizing our mental health. So the support group, there are supports that you can get from others. For instance, for solo agers, in many situations, it may be that you've lost your child or you've lost your spouse, and finding other people that have gone through those same experiences is really beneficial. Prioritizing both your cognitive health through activities like reading and writing and puzzles and all of those things, but also your social and emotional health through connections to others and asking for help when you need it, right? And so even in later life, there are many individuals that can benefit from therapy, right? And so making sure that that's an option. The last piece I want to touch on here is finding purpose in life. And so really thinking about what your goals are, what purpose you have at every stage of life, but especially as you're planning and entering into late life, thinking about what do you really want to focus on, right? Retirement is a time to do what you love and to find that purpose. So for some people, it is their career, and maybe they want to unretire or be engaged in mentorship of other people within their career. Maybe it's volunteering and giving back to others. It's developing talents. Maybe you've gone your whole life and you've really had a talent that you haven't been able to develop, and you want to learn new things. You want to leave a legacy, explore. Maybe it's traveling or exploring. But really, it is a time to think about, what does your perfect, purposeful retirement look like? Right. So who are the people that are in it? Developing those relationships. What do you want to be doing with your daily life, right? What do you want your life to look like? What brings you meaning? And this is important for solo agers, but anyone aging. What is going to bring you meaning? And how do you focus on that? And being able to ask for help to be able to focus on that. And just having a vision in mind. What is that purposeful later adulthood look like? Okay, the last piece I want to focus on before I'll end my time with you today is, what can you do to support those solo agers in your life? So if you've got some ideas, go ahead and throw them in the chat. What can you do to support people in your lives, whether it's clients you work with, neighbors, loved ones? What could you do to help support them? And go ahead and throw them in the chat. Oh, great. There's a resource in here that's being shared from navigatingsolo.com. So that's one to look at. And in response to this, so accept them as they are. Yeah, so you don't need to try to change other people. Try to support them and accept them. Listen to them, listen, a lot of that. Spend time with them. Reach out to them to see if they need help. Yeah, being proactive often with solo agers to really reach out. Take them shopping into appointments, listen to them. Yeah, offer, if you know somebody that's living alone and maybe doesn't have transportation, can you offer to take them shopping with you? Can you offer to help? Volunteer to visit them, offer transportation, advocate for them. That's a good one too, advocating for them. Offering to maybe go with them to a doctor's appointment to advocate for them, or wherever they might need that help. I've always volunteered to do projects around their house or help them move furniture. I also try to stop by homes in my complex to talk. Yeah, that's great. So just helping out, encouraging them, inviting them to activities. Yeah, bringing them into the fold too. So it's not always on that solo ager to have to be the one reaching out. I know I just said a lot about solo agers, that you need to be proactive and think outside the box and go out of your comfort zone. But I think it's just as important for all the rest of people in society to be willing to reach out and provide support and be inclusive of the solo agers in our lives. Someone just mentioned they just enrolled their oldest brother into the VA caregiving program. So I am now his caregiver. That's great. This will open up some training and potentially more assistance. Yeah, so taking advantage of programs, of ways that you can get support to help the solo agers in your lives too. That's great. Okay, let me jump into just a few things I want to say about how we can support solo agers. So most people, this is from that same survey, so it's of an AARP survey of people over the age of 50, but most people over age 50 know at least one solo ager. And so this just indicates, it's 64% know at least one. And among those, 80% say a solo ager they know is a friend, right? So 80% say they have at least one friend who's a solo ager. Most commonly it's a friend, but we can see this list here. It's also neighbors, it's siblings and other relatives here. You can think of all of these different people that they just might need you to be a part of their social support network, right? The ways that you can support solo agers, a lot of these you all just listed, right? And so this is from that same survey of what people think about the solo agers they know. So the type of help they've either provided or they're expecting to provide to the solo agers in their life. So the dark blue is things that they've currently provided or they currently provide or they have provided in the past. And then the light blue is things that they expect to provide in the future. So this first one is contacting them to make sure they're okay. So checking in with them. Helping them get to doctor's appointment is the second one. Discussing their plans for getting the assistance they might need while aging alone. Helping them manage their household, things like helping them cook or clean or get groceries. Helping manage day-to-day expenses like monitoring bank accounts, helping with finances, and helping to manage their investments. These are all things that people are doing a little bit less of. These are areas that solo agers should expect that they're more than likely to hire a professional for things like managing investments. But the contact and checking in, that can really be expected from just neighbors and friends. Okay, that is the end of my time. I do have some resources that I'll share with you all, but I'm going to leave those to send in I'll get a handout ready that you all can have, that Lacey can share with you all. So just a few take-home messages, and then we can have time for some questions. So solo aging definitely has some challenges that we mentioned, but it's important to keep in mind there are also some benefits. So we shouldn't think about this as just a population that needs our pity. This is a population that needs to be included and needs to be supported just like any other aging individual. There are strategies that we should think about for successful solo aging. Key amongst those is making plans while we're still healthy so that we don't get to a point where someone else that maybe we don't trust is making decisions for us. Reaching out to your social support network and making sure you have a solid support network that knows what you need, knows what your wishes are. And then taking care of yourself so that you can be in the best health possible, physically, mentally, to be able to age well and stay independent as long as you're hoping to do so. The last take-home message we just covered is reaching out to the solo agers in your own lives and bringing them into the fold, recognizing their strengths, their abilities, but bringing them in, allowing them to have the support network that they need. So these are some of the resources that I'll share with you. Some of these are related to solo aging specifically, so some reading, and then a couple different resources. There's a support group on Facebook that is all just for elder orphans. It's called Elder Orphans, but it's all about solo agers. And then there's a YouTube site that is called Solo and Smart that has tons of different videos that target just solo agers and the things that you need to think about when you're planning for all of your different needs as you age. And then some caregiving resources here as well that are helpful for any caregivers that I'll share with you as well. Okay, that is all I've got for you. So I can stop sharing my screen. If anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute yourself too. It doesn't necessarily have to be questions for me. It could be questions for the entire group too.
Heather, this has been an excellent presentation. I haven't seen questions roll through yet, but I want to let participants know that if you do have a question, you may type it in the chat box, or you can unmute and ask Heather. We have about 10 minutes for questions. So I don't know how many watch parties we have going on right now. For those who might be hosting a watch party, could you let me know how many people you have with you?
Just going to take away my screen so I can see you all.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you.
And feel free to email me if any questions come up too. I'll put my email in the chat.
Woohoo. That's awesome. Thanks, Laura.
Well, thank you all for sharing all of your thoughts and experiences today. I know we probably have some solo agers here. If there's anything you wanted to share with the group, and a lot of professionals here today that work with solo agers. So I hope that there's been a few tidbits that you can take back, but I know there's a lot of information we weren't able to cover today too. So we could go on and on.
Definitely. I mean, there's solo aging, I do think, is just going to be one of those things that many adults will face, sometimes willingly, sometimes not willingly. And I really appreciate your comment about that elder orphan. I really am not supportive of using that term, because I think, as Carmen said earlier, it's kind of I can't even say it. It infantizes older adults, and many adults are choosing to live independently, even as younger people, and for a variety of reasons. So I appreciate the content that you provided and the reminder of all the things that all of us need to be conscious of as we're getting older, because the truth is many adults will outsurvive their spouse, even if they aren't aging solo, and they will be solo at one point.
Yeah. And I know, looking into this information, there's a lot of individuals that feel like they're aging solo because they don't necessarily feel like they can rely on the people in their lives either. So, often you think of somebody with children. Well, of course, they're not aging alone. They've got children, but, children aren't always the most reliable, right? We can't always count on them to be our caregivers. And so keeping that in mind too, that when we're talking to clients or individuals in our communities, they may say they have children, but are they actually able to rely on those children? Sometimes it's because of distance they can't. Sometimes their children may have their own responsibilities or their own issues that makes them unable to be some good support. So it's always important to understand that whole picture of any individual. And so if we understand their whole context, we can try to help them the best possible.
And I love the wellness wheel. I think the wellness wheel is such a good visual tool to kind of help us understand those different pieces we need to be conscious of when we're planning for our own older age, because that's the goal. We're all going to end up older. So, if we can take steps as younger people to really ensure that we've planned for those later years in life, we can really enhance our quality of life.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you must have done an excellent job, because there aren't any questions, but if there are questions that come through later, you are welcome to send me an email and I will send the question to Heather. I'm sure she will be happy to share it with you. I have recorded, this is being recorded. It'll probably take a week or two before I can send the recording out, but I will get the recording to everybody who registered for this event. So one last call for questions. We can end a few minutes early.
Thank you all for joining. I definitely appreciate and active participation too. You all are better than my undergraduate students who I ask them to put things in the chat and I usually have to kind of pull teeth.
Yeah. But Lacey, we have one caregiver at the Rapid City VA that has a suggestion.
Yeah.
I would suggest that if the solo person is planning to remarry, that a prenuptial agreement be written up.
That's excellent advice, honestly. And it's, if you remarry and you have children from both, or both new spouses have children from previous spouses, yeah, there's a whole lot. Heather probably can tell you more about those
I was gonna
dynamics.
say, you could have a whole session on step families in later life and the challenges, especially when we talk about later life marriage. That's the challenges that, and I'm sure many of you see this in your work of fighting children, right? That are disagreeing on the care and things like that. So that's a big issue these days is how do we support those blended families in later life? And some of it is making sure that you have plans in place, like a prenup. So we know how our thing is going to be divided and we know who's going to be power of attorney, who makes decisions. All of those things are really important. Yeah.
Maybe that's a good topic for 23.
I was gonna say, put that on your list for topics for next year. That would be a great caregiving discussion.
Yep. And for those who are in the room, we are planning to make this an annual series. We've got really positive feedback. We're hoping to do more watch parties because we know not all adults have access to the internet. So if we can give them access to this content, that can help them and their families, really enhance their quality of life. Because that's really what we're trying to do with this content, is give you the resources you need to enhance the quality of life for yourself and your family. So that's a great topic. Stay tuned for 2023. We'll have another series of these webinars. Heather, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, just thank you all for joining, and just really think about that planning and including solo agers in your lives.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.